This is an update from the Utah Rare Plant team. Um, my name is Mindy Wheeler. Me and my team are the botanic arm of the Utah Natural Heritage Program, but we try to call ourselves the Utah Rare Plant Program, something just to sort of indicate that we do a lot more than just the Heritage Program duties. This is our current team, the middle photo here, Jen Poor in the middle and Jesse on the right side there. They have moved on, but we have Ben Gibbons, Zach Curry, and Megan McCormick. Of course, we have Blake Wellard flitting in and out, which we all definitely appreciate. We have a new member, Bailey Spears. She came in kind of late last season, and there I am looking like I own the West Desert there. Anyway, that's what it looks like to me. So front and center, I know I have talked about this before, but we are in the midst of revising the state wildlife action plan, and the wildlife folks are including plants and insects this time in the state wildlife action plan, which is kind of big news. So the meetings have started, the meetings will continue, but as of August 2025, we need to submit it to the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we need to have it done by then. There are 8 required elements, and the first one there, as you can see, is the species of greatest conservation need. And this, of course, is the crux of the issue in terms of our 250 species or more that we really need to be tracking, and getting that to a list that's palatable, I guess, to the state. And this, of course, is going on with all the other sections of wildlife as well, in terms of mollusks, small mammals, birds, etc. So everybody's sort of going through this process to try to figure out what are going to be the species of greatest conservation need, or SGCNs, for their section. So we will have our species of greatest conservation need, and we are talking about having a category of species of greatest information need. Those species, there's always those species that have taxonomic issues, or those species, plants that we just don't know enough about as to whether they warrant being on the SGCN list or not. Another thing to keep in mind is that this will be a state SGCN list. The BLM and the Forest Service will retain and maintain their own sensitive species lists. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that it is not a static list. It will remain dynamic. It will not be a full 10 years before this will get revised. We can do so at any time. It just has to go through DWR and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So in terms of rankings, this is certainly where the SGCN list starts. We have continued to do the rankings through the NatureServe calculator. We've done 230 so far since December 2019, continuing to work closely with the agencies, and importantly, really trying to reach out and get further information and input from our agency partners. We really do need input from our agency partners, because those of us, or those of them, I guess, who are closer to these plants and have these plants within their jurisdiction, they're inevitably going to know more about it, especially their threats, than we will. So we have made this web map app to hopefully make it a little bit easier to make comments and add to our knowledge about some of these species. Okay, so what we can do after we click that hyperlink is, this is all the data on Forest Service lands. So if I want to look up, say, we'll say Penstemon compactus, we'll apply that. It will zoom into Penstemon compactus, and then you can poke around, take a look at any of the data associated with any one of these points, whether you can see how many were found, who found it, what year, etc. So if you click the Smart Editor, you can click that same point and say, you know, something's wrong with that. That should be 50 yards to the west or something like that. So you can put the comments there in terms of that should be 50 yards to west. And then you can also put in any additional threats that we may not have, just any additional information that we may not have. The other thing that people can do, agency folks, that they can click if they want to make a general comment for Penstemon Compactus is just a general comment in terms of you know, this taxon appears secure, yada yada yada. So right, so they can make any comments and that will come directly to us. So it'll be really helpful to have those comments from people who are more familiar with a lot of these species than we are. So I think most of you have seen this already as well, but it's we continue to work on it. This is our common field guide that will give you information, conservation status, general info, distribution maps, etc. For our rare species. Right now we have all of the federally listed species done, most of the BLM sensitive species, and we're chipping away at the Forest Service sensitive species. So the next slide, we will take you to that hyperlink there and show you how it works. So if we click on that hyperlink, we can search for any species we may need more information about. So we're on a Penstemon compactus. So you can just click, well, let's just go to Penstemon, click enter, and then you can see which species we have finished. And then you can click on this and you can click on the different photos of it and you get information in terms of its ranking, general info, species range. It's got some maps in there. So this is really helpful for consultants perhaps, or whoever really wants to access this is generally able to do that and poke around for both plants and animals. Okay, so now we turn to our Field Maps app, what was once Collector. It has really helped us get the data organized, get it in the right place, and quickly get it into our database. We did make a 2023 layer, so your 2022 versions will not work, so please contact us and we can share it with you. We have a couple of videos up, we have some PowerPoints up that can help you get it set up. We can help you get it set up. We do plead with you to use it because it's been such a game changer in terms of getting our data to the right place and really making it useful. So the 2023 field season, we added about 15,000 total observations. All of our associated species observations also come into the database. We put in almost 2,800 rare plant observations from our team this year, and then a number of observations from partners, and that would be BLM or private contractors, Forest Service, and research. Okay, now I'm going to turn to what we've been up to in the field for the past year. And again, I just feel like we have done so much to reduce each of these to 30 seconds or less each. It doesn't do much of a favor to us or to our partners, but this is where I would strongly encourage you to contact any of us to ask any further questions about any of these projects. The Mantilla South Forest, we've been doing a lot of monitoring for their species of conservation concern list, doing quite a bit of monitoring as well as surveys up in the Alpine. So another place that me and the team spent some time was up in the Logan Peak area, Mount Naomi Wilderness, a really beautiful spot. Looking for some of the sensitive species up there. Put in a long-term monitoring plot for Penstemon compactus, as well as a new kind of plot we were trying for Viola frank smithii. I will say right now that I have not heard any more about the mountain goat augmentation for the Logan Peak area. Um, Hoping that those conversations will start soon should they need to. I'm sorry I don't have any more on that topic for all of you. Another project was Cisco milkvetch and allies, and this will continue for quite some time to come. Uh, we entered into a conservation strategy with all of these partners on the right here for these three species, Fabulosus, Vehiculus, and Islii, because one of these species taxa does occur on each one of these landowners here. The conservation agreement is for 30 years. We did this in May of 2022, and the Fish and Wildlife Service found a not warranted finding in December of the same year. So we reread an Astragalus islii plot that or two of those that we put in last year, and we added a vehiculus monitoring plot near Courthouse Rock. Last year was not a year for survey for Fabulosus or islii. They were just really nowhere to be found this year, or last year. I hope this year is a different story. We also did the 4th year of post-delisting monitoring for Deseret milkvetch. The numbers increased a bit last year. I will be very curious as to what happens this upcoming year. It is the last year of the required post-delisting monitoring, after which the Fish and Wildlife Service will see if we met, or see if the Astragalus deseraticus is stable enough or met the stipulations put out in the post-delisting monitoring plan. We also continue to do our work on heliotrope milkvetch, Astragalus montii. We reread the long-term monitoring plots. I think we've been reporting on this for a number of years, but we did find that Joel Tui plots from 1988, which is exciting. We're just finding that we need to expand where we put our plots, because right now we're just not, the monitoring plots aren't really covering that much of the population. In 2022, the trend did not look good, but again, I think we need to put in some more plots and cover more of the population. Goose Creek milkvetch, another one of these darn milkvetches that boom or bust. We reread the demography plots. That data is in Hope Hornbeck's hands. She is working on a publication for the population viability analysis from the data that we have collected over the last, 6 years now. And while we're in the area, we did a few surveys for the Penstemon idahoensis. Okay, Washington County. We were funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service to do some surveys and some other work for the listed species down there, and discovered a new population of Shipley's milkvetch a little southeast of Leeds. We were assisted by, of course, the good botanical eyes, but also we had in hand a suitable habitat model given to us by the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as a layer of the density of annual grasses. And so putting the two together, found a good spot to go look, and there it was. We did send a sample of it to Robert Johnson at BYU. He validated the identification. We still do want to go down there and gather some pods next year, just to make sure, because Aromaticus does tend to look pretty similar to this one. We also revisited some other populations of other rare species that were more than 40 years old. This is something that we're really trying to concentrate on. There's a lot of data in our database that's pretty old, either from SciNet and or Ben Franklin days or previous to that, that we would really need to check up on and see if they still exist in their habitat. We spent a bit of time out in the Great Basin and the Desert Experimental Range managed by the Forest Service out there looking for this selection of species out there. There's a lot to look for out in the Great Basin in good years. I'll be very curious as to what it looks like out there this season. We also did a bit of sea collection spots for the BLM. So the SOS crews only have so much time and so much area that they can cover scouting for good sea collection sites. So we decided we would try to help them out. And if we came upon a great population of globe mallows or other desirable species for their collections, we would go ahead and put a GPS point on them and send them their way. Okay, spent a little bit of time in the Hanksville and Boulder Escalante area looking for Oreoxys trouteri. There was a new finding down there for Oreoxys trouteri and a couple of globe mallows we were looking for. Oreoxys trouteri turns out is just not quite sure about that one. Mark Madsen sort of put it through his eyes and just not sure what exactly we're looking at. So if you do come across it or think you've come across it, please do collect it and let us know, send it away for part of the genetic study to see what exactly we have. Okay, Desolation Canyon. This was a huge undertaking. It all started with that report from Joel Toohey that some friends of his went down the river and could have sworn they saw a population of cyclodemia from the river, um, and really wanted to get that into the 5-year review of cyclodemia a couple years ago. Didn't make that, but um, indeed, the team did find at least 2 new populations of cyclodemia. They tend to think that there's quite a bit more in that vast area. So we had part of the team that went down the river with some academic botanists. I'll get to that in a minute. And then a team that came down from above with horses. It was quite the undertaking. So this is obviously the team down in the river, Don Mansfield from College of Idaho and Mark Darash from the University of Wyoming, and a couple others came with them, and the BLM Ranger, of course. Just a ton of collections that they made. They think they found a population of Carex speculocola in that area as well. That collection is sitting with a Carex specialist right now to see if we can get that validated. Here's some more great photos from that trip. It looked like a wonderful one, and we're thinking that we might do it again. We did get invited again by Don Mansfield and Mark Durach. We're just trying to figure out the logistics. Could be a very interesting year for that. Okay, spent a little bit of time in the Uinta Basin looking for Hesperodanthus argillaceus or Schonochromity argillacea, whichever you want to go by. Checked up on some Lepidium barnumbianum. We wanted to check on that population by near starvation reservoir, and checked up on Phacelia argyllensis. They did find all 3 of these. Again, it was kind of a rough year for the Uinta Basin as well. Okay, spent a fair amount of time too on, well, the La Salle part of the Manti-La Salle forest. We needed to be looking for some of those alpine species that sort of sneak over into Utah, but are pretty darn, some of these are pretty darn abundant in Colorado. Nevertheless, the Forest Service really needs to keep track of those species that are at the edge of its range. We found some Epilobium nevadensis in the Fish Lake National Forest as well. Just a quick Gary Larson intermission. I promised myself a while back that I would try to include a Far Side cartoon in every one of my presentations. I showed this at the weed meeting in St. George a couple weeks ago and just did not get the reaction that I was looking for. So since this is all remote, I'm going to imagine the correct response. So this is some of the work that makes me think that maybe we need to change our name to the native plant team instead of the rare plant team. We've been getting involved in a lot of pollinator stuff, which has been a lot of fun. Doing the Utah Pollinator Pursuit on the right side here, which is a citizen science program to get people to record observations of monarch butterflies as well as bumblebees on their phones with GPS and photos to just gather some more information on these insects that we really need. And then this is the Utah Pollinator Habitat Program, which started from House Bill 224 in 2021. And the bill pretty much said get more native plants and native seeds on the ground. And yes, the word native is in the bill, thanks to Jackie Grant, who is at the right place at the right time to catch that and make sure it did say native. And I'll get into this in a minute. So, as I said, it was House Bill 224 introduced by Representative Ashley Matthews. Kudos to her. So what we did is we had people apply for pollinator habitat kits, and so they put in this application. We evaluated those applications, and successful applicants would get a minimum of 3 pollinator kits. Each pollinator kit was about 30 plants of 5 to 6 different species. We had upland kits and wetland kits. We concentrated on northern Utah this past year. This year we are trying to go statewide. It's a little bit difficult as the prison grew out most of our seedlings last year, and the prison as most of us have heard, is just having a tough time getting up and running this year. So this shows just one of the greenhouses that we used. Again, we used the state prison, which, man, they can really grow some nice stuff. We used the USU Learning Greenhouse, and we used a High Mountain Nursery, and they all grew wonderful stuff for this. And so this is just showing how we sort of organized a lot of these kits, a lot of these plants, and tried to put them in piles for the people who were going to pick them up the next day. And this shows just some of the folks that put these in the ground. We really had a really successful first year for this. The success shows in these slides here. We gave out about 19,000 live native plants. We received about 330 applications, but we could only award 106 of those, so the demand was much greater than the supply. And part of the bill was that the state would pick up 25% of the cost, the applicants would pick up the other 75%, and we far exceeded that ratio. We figured it was about 12 to 1, $12 for every $1 that the state put in to make this work. And this was the fun part, to see some of these people behind the applications and how happy they were to pick up these free plants. This was the city of Murray that were putting in a pollinator garden. Just a number of people just working their landscapes over. So we are going to do this again, certainly. The application process will open, I believe, on May 15th. If you check our website, the dates for this year are up on it. And just want to say thanks. It looks like I'm totally out of time, went over. Please do contact me with questions.